Here is the system page on HCI management platform. Like I said, the system page here is like the setting menu on your mobile phone. You can do all the settings right here on this page, including the licensing, which I introduced in the beginning. And you can also update, you can sync the date and time of this of the cluster. There are also some other features, like you can see view all the logs and alarms that were recorded during the running of the cluster. You can also see the alarms. You can search those alarms to locate a specific alarm, when it happened. And let's go back. There are also, some other functions here, including the system backup and restore. You can also, upgrade the system, our cluster, right here in the system, on the system page. If there's a new version of Sangfor HCI software released, you can download that PKG file and upload the PKG file right here, and then the cluster will be upgraded automatically. And currently, there will be a short period of disruption during the upgrade. In the future, we will make this upgrade non-disruptively. For the HA and resource scheduling, you can set up here on this tab. You can choose the sensitivity of the HA, because sometimes you just don't want that HA to be so sensitive. You don't need that high, you don't have that high requirement on the business continuity or the VM reliability. You can just choose the low sensitivity for the HA level. For some critical applications, critical VMs, you just choose the highest level of sensitivity. That means if the node fails for 30 seconds, the VMs, these critical VMs, will be recovered. They will be rebooted on another healthy node, and your business will be resumed within one minute. There are also some migration triggers that you can set here. If the storage is disconnected, the HA will certainly be enabled. And otherwise, if the storage is okay, the VMs can access the storage functionally and normally. Then no matter is the VM failure or is the management interface failure or nearby edge, which is also the business network failure, you can choose whether to reboot the VMs on your will. If the business is okay, the storage is also okay. I mean the network, the business network as well as the storage network is okay. Only the management interface is disconnected. Then the HA will not be enabled. Because to emphasize more on this two optional circumstances, because the edge is bundled with business ports on different nodes. When there is a edge network failure, it might only be one node business network failure. So if you restart the VM, maybe the VM can be run again. I mean the business can be accessed again on another node, because that node also has a port, a business port, which is connected, which is bundled to the edge. So you can choose whether to enable the HA for these two circumstances. For the resource scheduling, you can enable it to reach a load balancing it's called distributed resource scheduling. Okay, you can do it manually or automatically. Typically, we will recommend you to do it automatically. Okay, and this function is triggered by CPU or memory usage. Okay, you can choose either CPU or memory, or just specify the CPU resource or the memory resource. Once you set a threshold for the CPU usage or memory usage, and a specific node, when the CPU and the memory on this node exceed a certain level, which is the threshold you set here, the system will trigger some of the VM migration from this heavily loaded node to other more free node, just to make the workload across different servers more balanced. You can also specify certain VMs for the migration. For the automated hot add, it's like you can just choose a VM, and the trigger level, the trigger is also based on the CPU and the memory usage. It's like when you create a VM at the beginning, you allocate a certain amount of resource to this VM, but sometimes the VM resource can be used very quickly, because maybe the application which is hosted by this VM is very fast growing, and so it may require more and more resource from the VM to make sure that the applications can be run smoothly. So you can enable this feature for this VM. Okay, so when the CPU of this VM or the memory of this VM exceeds the threshold you set here, the system will trigger more resource to be added to the VM to make sure this VM has enough resource to be used by the applications. You can also set the sensitive level here. So let's go back to the system. There is one feature which is released on 5.2 that I want to point out here, is sub-administrators. Okay, sub-administrators, this feature is extremely useful in R&D department and large enterprise which has different teams to manage different parts of their data center. So to use this feature, you can do it this way. First, you can create an account. Like here, I can create an account. And this account, I will allow it to use only VM. And you can set up, you can give it a password. Then you can set the permissions. Like I said, this one I will allow it. This account I will allow it to use VMs only. For the network, I'm not going to allocate any network or data store resource for this account. It can create VM, and I will allocate certain amount of resource to the account. Maybe the VMs of this the VMs that are created by this account, the resource of these VMs will be limited. Like the cores of the CPU will be limited to 6 cores, and the memory, I will allow it to run 64, no actually 16 maximum, and for the disk size 20, or maybe 50. Okay, that's it. As you can see here, there's a warning saying that my password is too easy, so I need to set up a more complicated password. Okay. Then, as you can see, this account is created here. I can just log out and then log in using this account. Okay, there will also be some notifications, like the first time when you enter the interface, it will prompt you with some brief introduction of the features on the platform. Here, as you can see, because this account is only allowed to use the resource of the VMs, it cannot view the data store, it cannot make any configurations on the networking. There's nothing here. And when it creates VMs, the VM resource will be limited. Like here, if I create a VM, and okay, basically it cannot create any VMs because I didn't assign any storage to this account. If you want to assign the permissions of creating VMs to this account, you need to go back and access the account of super administrator, and then let's go back. Let's go to sub administrators and modify the policy, modify the account of permissions for the task. You can add it right here and the settings. Because I need to create VMs permissions for this test account, I will assign some storage for this account. I will assign only shared storage and not network. And also I can specify certain VMs for this account. Like this one, I don't want this account, test account, to access. I just delete it. Here as well. Okay. So the test account can only access CentOS 0002 and CentOS import 1, and also it can create some VMs. All right. Okay. Let's go. So let's log out and log in with the test account. Still, this account doesn't have any permissions to access the network as well as the system. Okay, it now can view 2 VMs of the total 5 VMs because the permissions are limited. The permission is limited to only these 2 VMs. Okay, it has the permission to create VMs. We create VMs. Now you can see it can use data store. Okay, the shared storage. Choose one operating system, and if you can remember the resource, the CPU resource that that is allocated to this VM is limited to 6 cores. So maybe if I put 8 core to this VM, you see there is a warning telling you that because the storage as well as the some of the resource allocated to this VM is limited. You see, only 50 GB is available for the VM to use, but here because it's assigned 80 GB, so it cannot be created. This VM cannot be created. So that is a very good example of showing the features of sub-administrators. This is a very useful feature, especially in R&D and big enterprises with different teams. You can assign different teams with different amount of resources and different levels of permissions. So it is like a small version of multi-tenancy in the cloud, but you don't need a cloud platform. You just need Sangfor HCI. So it is one-stop solution for this scenario. You can also create your own permissions. I mean, you can just add a permission. Because the storage is very important, it is not allowed to be used by sub-administrators. Okay, the data store can only be modified and changed by super administrator. But for compute and network, these two parts can be used by sub-administrators, and these permissions are assigned by super administrator. Like for compute, you can create a specific policy or permission. You can create a permission that only allows the sub-administrator to configure VM. Okay, you don't allow the account to use VM, to use virtual machine, to power them off, power them on, or configure the VM groups or something other, some other operations. For the networking is the same. You can allow the account to configure those specific components. You can also control the connections that this account can do within your assignment. Okay. So everything is controlled by super administrator, and you can just achieve this fine granular management on different accounts